lecture. I want to cover the pituitary, take a break and come back and cover the adrenal gland and the gonads. That should, whatever time remains at the end of class, I want to present the histology slides that you'll be quizzed on Friday. So that'll be at the end. So for now, I want to talk about, well, I have a little cartoon here. It used to be the pituitary was considered the master gland. However, it turns out we know that the hypothalamus actually controls the pituitary, okay, making it the true master. And that's really what I want to talk about. We call this the hypothalamic control of the anterior pituitary, and as this slide shows, the posterior pituitary. This slide's an important study. It's on your test. Okay. Sometimes I do that. I put figures from the book or the lecture slides on your test. This is one of them. Hypothalamic control of the posterior pituitary. The control, well, I'll describe it as a direct neural connection. It helps to remember, I think I might have mentioned this, in development, the posterior pituitary and the anterior pituitary, I drew in your notes, or I drew on the board, upgrowth, downgrowth. Well, anyways, the downgrowth was actually neural tissue and became the posterior pituitary. Okay? So cells from the hypothalamus were able to extend their axons all the way to the posterior lobe. So they draw cells, but the cell body's up here. And then they extend their axons all the way down to here. Because it's all the same tissue. But this is epithelial tissue, so we're not going to see that. So I think it helps to kind of draw this connection out. So I'm going to blank this slide here. So I just tried to draw, this. We'll just kind of get a facsimile of it. But let me give you some landmarks here. Okay, more or less that was it. And so what I've drawn here is, let me put some lines here. In between the lines is the stalk, the infundibulum, where the pituitary below is connected. So above it is pretty much the area of the hypothalamus. I'll just put HYP for short. And all of this is anterior and posterior pituitary. So the posterior pituitary is behind. So this is all pituitary. Okay, that right there, where you cut sagittally, is the optic chiasm, where the cranial nerves cross, cranial nerve 2. They cross at the optic chiasm. Okay, this little thing I drew back here, we're not concerned with it. It's the mammillary body, but it's there. So the hypothalamus is up here. And there are clusters of neurons that will send their axons down here to control, or I should say, not control, that directly connect to the posterior lobe. Because what we're going to study here are neurons that secrete hormones. So I would write that down, because that's not something you're used to hearing. We always taught you in 4.3 that neurons secrete neurotransmitters, like ACH, but neurons secrete hormones. So we're going to study some neurons that secrete hormones, and some of these you have to learn the name. Now there's a cluster of neurons right above the optic chiasm. Okay. So I'm going to draw. Oh, I can't see it now. So let me use green. I'll use a different color. I'll use green. I'm going to draw it right here. I'm going to draw a cell right there. Here's the cell body of a neuron. It's called the superoptic nuclei. Let me go over here. So we're at green. It was called the superoptic nuclei. Okay, it's a cluster of cells. I just drew one cell body, but they synthesize ADH. We talked about it the last time. So it's synthesized in the cell body. However, to release it, do you remember the name of that long specialized process? It's called the axon. The axon will extend all the way down through the infundibulum. Into the posterior pituitary. Okay? So know that one, and know another one. It's called the paraventricular nucleus. Or, let's go singular. I put nuclei, that pluralizes it, but there's only one of them. Let's go singular on that. Sorry. Well, anyways, this cluster of cells will secrete the hormone oxytocin. So let me draw the approximate location where these cells are located. It's called paraventricular because they're right by the third ventricle, and that'll be right around here. So there's the cell body. It synthesizes the hormone, then the axon will transport it down here and release it from there. So, hormone released from one group of cells and then the other, ADH and oxytocin. You should be able to know what they synthesize and secrete, and you should be able to identify those nuclei. Okay? One's there, one's there. You're expected to know that. Now, let's remember that the bloodstream will carry away the hormones into circulation. And in blood circulation, it always goes arteries, capillaries, veins. Okay? And so, there's a little artery. I'm going to draw a capillary bed. Capillary beds are very dense. They're packed out with very small capillaries, the smallest blood vessels, but that's where you have the exchange, and this is where the hormones will be picked up. So I'm going to draw it half red and half blue. I always do that because it symbolizes the gas exchange that occurs when you flow through a capillary bed. So, and then back out. So blood's coming out in the venous blood, and then blood's going in the artery. And then along the way, you're going to pick up these hormones that are being secreted. Well, it's ADH and it's oxytocin. So it's a long way to describe that you just have cells that secrete their hormones right into the bloodstream. They happen to be neurons, okay? It's a direct connection from hypothalamus to posterior pituitary. And this tract of axons has a name. It's the hypothalamic hypophyseal tract. Hypothalamic. Big long term. Know that. Okay? It describes this direct neural connection, and that's pretty much it. But any questions on that connection? Because now I'd like to talk about the control of the anterior pituitary. So we'll come back to this drawing for no questions. Well, if we advance the slide, we see that this figure is showing you the connection between hypothalamus and anterior pituitary. So I'm going to erase this. Change that word to anterior. So the control of the anterior pituitary is not a neural connection. Well, it's more of a vascular connection. What I mean by that, you're going to have to study what's called this portal system. We still have neurons that secrete hormones. However, because the anterior pituitary is what's derived from epithelial tissue, it's a different tissue type. So in development, the neurons that control it, they can't extend all the way down into it like they did before because it's a different tissue type. So they have to stop short. Okay? And then they use this vascular connection to get their regulatory hormones or tropic hormones to control the release of these hormones down here. So that's what I have to describe. Well, basically, to appreciate these portal systems, actually, there's only 3 in physiology, and this is the first one you'll learn. To appreciate what a portal system is, it's a shortcut. Okay, and you can see it's a short distance from here to here, but to give you a full appreciation of a portal system, I pretty much have to teach how blood normally circulates. And because we haven't had cardio yet, I'm going to take a minute or 2 to do that. So if this is a shortcut, what's the normal way blood flows? Well, you have the heart that pumps blood into arteries. Okay, so it's a simple sketch here. And I'm going to draw an artery coming off the heart. I'll leave a little gap there. And you're going to pump blood. Let's say there's an endocrine gland cell right here into a grid. Draw one cell. Its job is to secrete hormones into the bloodstream, right? And so it needs a capillary bed to do that. So the arteries will branch out and eventually you get to a capillary bed, say right here. Again, I'm going to draw it half red, half blue to symbolize the gas exchange. You get another blue pen. And well, look, this is how the hormones get into the bloodstream. And then the veins will collect it. So pretend my hormone, it's being secreted to some target somewhere else. It's got to get into the bloodstream. So it gets in, it's swept away by the venous blood, right? Well, veins return blood back to the heart. So you got to go all the way back to the heart. Veins return blood to the heart. Just remember, vein in. Veins return blood to the heart. And I'm even going to skip pulmonary circulation. Okay, let's just say you go back to the heart and you redistribute this blood that's circulated. It went to the lungs to get reoxygenated, and it came back to the heart. Well, anyways, if you're a hormone circulating to your target, you got to go all the way back to the heart, and go all the way out to the lungs, all the way back, and you got to be re-pumped out again to your target. So that's why I left this little gap here. Let's pretend it goes somewhere like there. And let's pretend that this is a target cell. Remember I talked about target cells last time? It's what the hormone is going to affect for the physiology. You're circulating the hormone to communicate with some other part of the body. So that's right here, okay, in my sketch. So here's capillary bed. So our hormone that had to recirculate is go all the way back to the heart. And finally, you can kind of get here and bind its receptor. And so, appreciate that this is how hormones normally work. They circulate through the blood, they go everywhere, but they have to be like diluted by the entire blood circulation to do that normally. And so, wouldn't it be more efficient if you could stick a blood vessel right from this capillary bed to this capillary bed? Yes, it would be. So let's do that. Let's put a vein, go right there. Boom, boom. Oh, okay. Well, let's take the path of least resistance. Let's just go cap bed 1, and then portal vein, cap bed 2. Oh, I'm there already. Okay, so that's the shortcut. So any questions on why that's a shortcut? You can see how it's a shortcut, right? It's bypass the whole systemic circulation. So in portal systems, the portal system bypasses systemic circulation. In our example, you don't dilute the tropic hormones. Okay, so we'll draw it out, but I'm going to erase this. Any questions on the concept here before I erase it? So it helps to draw this out too, so let's do that. I'm going to blank this. And we'll just add it to our, well, to my drawing. I don't know if you're drawing it, but it helps me to draw it to teach it. I'll use another color here. Draw another cell. Okay, this nucleus, there are many nuclei, and for all these regulatory hormones, tropic hormones that are being secreted from that purple cell, it's too many to name, so you don't have to know the names. Just know that these neurons secrete tropic hormones. And I'll list them on the board too. And there's many of them, so I even have to look at my notes when I do too. Before I list all the tropic hormones, what it's going to do, it's going to send its axon around to the level of the infundibulum, maybe around there. It's going to kind of stop short a little bit because it can't enter a different tissue type. That's what I've tried to do, stop short. But it's going to secrete into a capillary bed. We'll call it cap bed 1. So you have arterial blood coming in, oxygen rich, into a capillary bed. I'm going to draw it half red, half blue, like I've been doing. That capillary bed, instead of going back to the heart, instead of going arteries, capillaries, veins back to the heart, it goes cap bed 1, vein, cap bed 2. Okay, that's the portal system. Again, I'll draw a vein. It's going out here. There might be more than one. I'm just going to draw one for simplicity's sake. And I'm going to draw my cap bed 2 down here. I'm not going to cross hatch it, but I'm going to make it all blue. And I'm going to draw a vein coming off that. But to be strict, to define the portal system, it's 1, 2, 3. Portal system. Cap bed 1, portal vein, cap bed 2. Okay, so any questions on the portal system and, well, anything I've described for the anterior part? We're controlling it with tropic hormones, okay, because you can't extend the neurons all the way to it, so we control it with tropic hormones. That's kind of what we're going for here. But we have, it's very efficient that we have this portal system here. Notice how the cap bed 1 is half red, half blue. We have the gas exchange. So all the blood coming here, it's all deoxygenated, so there's no gas exchange here. It happened up here. So that's why this is all blue. And I want to identify some cells that are sensitive to the tropic hormones, so that's why I left it up as an open circle. Okay, well, anyways, the tropic hormones that you have to know control different endocrine structures in the body. So it starts with the brain, it starts with the hypothalamus. One of the hormones that will control the thyroid is Thyrotropin-Releasing Hormone. So I'm going to list it under here. So I'm going to abbreviate releasing hormone RH. So thyrotropin releasing hormone, I'll just abbreviate the whole thing TRH sometimes. And so that'll be made by this cell up there. And so what it'll do, it'll travel down the axon, it'll be released into cap bed 1, right? So it gets into there, it goes to cap bed 2 through the portal vein, and it gets there, and there's cells called thyrotropes in the anterior pituitary. So I'm going to erase this here. All of these cells in the anterior pituitary. These are what we would call the target cells. And they're called thyrotropes. Trope means cell. And so let me just draw a cell here. Yeah, there's a cell. It's a thyrotrope. It's stimulated by this releasing hormone. So in response to that, these thyrotropes will release thyroid-stimulating hormone. I need more longer whiteboard. Anyways, that's abbreviated TSH for short. Okay, so these hormones are being released directly from cells in the anterior pituitary. Others call this ant-pit hormones. So this is how you control the anterior pituitary. You don't do it through a neuron going directly to you. You control it with a regulatory hormone or a tropic hormone. Okay? So if you want to stimulate the thyroid, you release this from the brain, the hypothalamus. You use the portal system to stimulate those cells in the anterior pituitary, and then you release the hormone that will directly stimulate the thyroid. Okay. And I'm going to list a bunch more, but before I do, is there any questions? This is one of the more difficult things. Well, it's not difficult for me, but on the test, what I see students do a lot, you confuse this column and this column. You get them all flubbed up in your head. Okay, it's a lot of detail. There are other releasing hormones. Another one is CRH. The full name is Corticotropin-Releasing Hormone. Or CRH for short. And so again, that's from up here, okay? So let me just kind of start a list here. You got TRH, you got CRH, correct? They use the portal system and they stimulate cells down here. So CRH will stimulate cells, we just call it by the same name, corticotroph. And those cells, when stimulated by CRH, will release ACTH. The full name is, well, actually, the abbreviation is ACTH. Adrenocorticotropic hormone, big long name. And they're so long that I allow abbreviations on the test. You just can't mix up your letters. I usually don't like abbreviations, but I'll allow it. But if you flub up the letters, then that's on you. So be sure to get the abbreviations correct. So far, we got TRH and CRH, but when they stimulate cells down there, the hormones that are released are TSH and ACTH. Okay. You also have gonadotropin-releasing hormone. Full name is gonadotropin-releasing hormone, GnRH for short. And they will stimulate gonadotrophs. And those gonadotrophs will release FSH, LH. Those two, that's a pair, are called your gonadotropins. Target your gonads, the ovaries and testes. We'll look at those by the end of lecture today. Okay, so again, keep the list going, so keep it straight in your head. The GnRH comes from here. And then from down here, you have gonadotrophs that are stimulated. And then they'll release FSH and LH. Both of those, it's a twofer. Gonadotropins, FSH and LH. And the list goes on. I'm going to start at the top again. We're going to talk about hormones that will, in females, cause the lactation, prolactin. So there's a PRH, there's a PIH. The I is inhibitory. Okay? So there's a prolactin releasing hormone, prolactin RH. Prolactin inhibiting hormone, the molecule has been identified as dopamine. That's So I'll just put dopamine. These hormones will either release or inhibit hormones from cells called lactotrophs because they help lactation in the nursing mother. Well, lactotrophs. I better put another cell type. We're up to 4 cells here. Lactotrophs. They're going to respond to the PRH or PIH. Okay, if it's PRH, well then you're stimulated to release prolactin. PRL is the abbreviation for prolactin. Okay, I'll do the physiology of all these ant-pit hormones just after this. But anyways, right up here, PRH, PIH. I know it's kind of getting busy. There's a lot of them. And so we have lactotrophs. I think I drew my lactotroph rating. Well, anyways, when you get down to here, it's PRL, prolactin that's released. It will target the mammary glands. Okay. There's one more set that controls the release of growth hormone. GHRH, GHIH. And at this point, I'll stop writing them out. It's easy to remember that the GH is growth hormone. Okay? Those will target cells called somatotrophs. That will release GH, growth hormone. Growth hormone it's the largest secretion from the anterior pituitary. So again, you gotta remember, it's controlled by GHRH, GHIH will inhibit it. And then you have a bunch of somatotrophs down here that will release growth hormone. And I wrote it in the biggest letters because it's my understanding it's about half the secretions of all these other hormones. And it's important. I'll go over the physiology later. So now you know all the minutiae of how you control the anterior pituitary. The neurons secrete regulatory hormones. That's how you're going to regulate. So the cells that actually secrete the anterior pituitary hormones, all these in the middle column, they're in the anterior pituitary. They're epithelial tissue, and they have to go through the physiology of all the ones we wrote. So I'm going to pull this back down. We'll look at the figure. And see if you're with me here. You can see what they call it. Well, let's see if you're with me. What did I call it? I call it CAPAD 1. Okay? Same difference. Portal veins, I drew 1, they drew 2. CAPAD, it's all blue, right? All the cells, they don't picture cells in here, but they release all these hormones. Okay? Don't confuse these hormones with these hormones. So in your notes, when I say neurons make tropic hormones, are you going to be able to connect the dots here, right? You wrote them all down. Now, I think it's easy. I think what's difficult is all the letters, like a big alphabet in your brain. So I would spend some time rehearsing that, okay? I want to move on and actually talk about the anterior pituitary hormones a little more than just mentioning them and writing their names on the board. So I kind of put some axes of all the hormones, anterior and posterior. We can talk about their function a little more. I talked about ADH quite a bit already, to the point where I don't think I have anything that's new information on here. We talked about how if you're trying to correct for dehydration, you might be thirsty, you might have an increased saltiness of the blood. That's a stimulus for its release. And if it is, it'll target the kidney cells for the aquaporins and water reabsorption. So I kind of went over that already. And I even did mention that if you're adequately hydrated, that would inhibit its release. So if it's stimulated to be released, you decrease urine output. If you're adequately hydrated, you'll increase your urine output. So moving on from that. The other posterior pituitary hormone, I put a picture here to remind us these two things. That's the superoptic nuclei, that releases the ADH, but the oxytocin is released from here. So be able to identify these, superoptic nucleus, paraventricular nucleus, this one secretes oxytocin. I haven't mentioned this yet. Think about this one for females. It will target smooth muscle in females, and it's the smooth muscle of the lactiferous ducts. Targets smooth muscle of lactiferous ducts. And when it does that, the smooth muscle contracts in a way that lets the milk down. So we simply call it milk letdown. Not sure if milk letdown is one word or two, but you allow the milk into the mouth of a suckling infant. So that's a stimulus for its release. Suckling is a plus for stimulus. Now the uterus, during labor and contraction, is targeted. It targets the myometrium. The uterus. Well, that's simply, myo means muscle. It's the muscle layer. It's the smooth muscle. That'll help push baby out during labor. Contractions of labor. Now we haven't had repro yet, but that's the next unit. So imagine the uterus wall. As baby gets bigger, you stretch it out. You know, and baby's inside there. So baby going out head first, the baby spine. The baby's feet, and maybe baby's pushing against the wall. There's baby trying to get out. But anyway, it's head first. It's pushing against the wall. That stretching will trigger the release of oxytocin. Okay? And those contractions are they're very painful. The cervix means neck, right? Like the cervical vertebra. It's the neck of the uterus is the cervix. It must dilate. Okay, it's got to dilate. It's a progressive experience where it gets bigger and bigger. It should dilate to about 10 centimeters. And when it gets big enough, a baby's head can fit through. Well, anyways, the cervical dilation is also a stimulus for its release. Okay. So those kind of happen together. Cervical dilation is also a stimulus. I even put sex arousal as a stimulus. Oxytocin is called the intimacy hormone. Okay, I see it more and more. So any questions on oxytocin? This is for females. Okay, that's the function of that. I'm going to move on. This one, TRH, TSH, and then thyroid hormone. I always jokingly say for oxytocin, if you have sex with your pregnant wife, you're risking a squirt in the face, right? And then no left elbow anyways. Think about that for a little bit. Okay, this one, thyroid hormone. So it goes TRH, TSH. Let's just talk about TH, which is an abbreviation for thyroid hormone. In Friday's lecture, I have a whole thing, a whole spiel on thyroid hormone. For now, I'll just mention that when thyroid hormones elevate, I'm writing the negatively feedback to turn it off. So I'll just put negative feedback to turn it off. So when you have enough, you just turn off the original stimulus so you don't get too much. The function of thyroid hormone is to boost metabolism, increase the basal metabolic rate. More on thyroid hormone Friday. Growth hormone has wide-acting effects, so I have a lot of information on here. So let me point out what I already mentioned. Its release is controlled by GHRH, so that'll stimulate the somatotropes. And the wide-ranging actions have indirect or direct action either through the liver and IGFs, or it'll directly break down your energy stores. And so books typically call the two categories of effects of GH anabolic and anti-insulin. So let me kind of outline that for you. Growth hormone, anabolic effects, in anatomy and physiology, anabolic pretty much means tissue building. Okay, the other category is anti-insulin. So let's think of insulin. Insulin is your major anabolic hormone. When you eat a large meal, think of that as an insulin trigger. Eat a large meal, you go to bed at night, insulin's released, and it helps your body store the calories from the food you eat for nutrition. Okay, that's insulin. This hormone, it does everything insulin does, and it does everything insulin does not. So it's kind of like it does both. So for the anabolic effects, growth hormone targets liver. When it targets the liver will release insulin-like growth factors, or IGFs. So the liver releases IGFs. So that stands for insulin-like growth factors. So these growth factors may be considered hormones, but whether you consider them hormones or not, they're called insulin-like growth factors. They're going to build tissue. And so what they do is they increase your lean mass. You're going to increase, it's the IGFs that will increase muscle mass. It's going to increase bone and cartilage growth. At the same time, the way I think of it as, if you're going to do all this tissue building, you kind of need energy to do that. So what you're going to do is you're going to break down fat. Growth hormone can have a direct effect on fat. We call that lipolysis, break down fat. When you break down your fat, you're going to increase the free fatty acids circulating in the blood. that's the molecule that can be used for fuel to burn. So, break down triglycerides. Triglycerides are the storage form of fat. Okay, I think of a triglyceride as a letter E. Each of the three legs of the E is a fatty acid. And so the lipolysis is the process of just breaking those off so that the free fatty acids are free to circulate and that muscles can use that for energy. Increase circulating free fatty acids. The other energy store you tap is glycogen. So you just break down the glycogen, you increase the level of glucose in the blood. So I'm writing increase circulating glucose. So I've listed all the little facts. Just think of growth hormone as the hormone of your youth, because you're building your muscle, and you're breaking down fat. Okay? That's why athletes like to abuse it. It's illegal to do. I remember the first Olympics I watched as a kid. I'm kind of dating myself, 1984. And they call that the growth hormone games, and which is remarkable. That's before they had molecular biology. The only way you could get growth hormone was to extract it from a cadaver. And it causes all kinds of problems in the athlete. Like one bizarre thing is it makes your jaw grow really big. So all these adult athletes would have braces because I guess their jaw was getting all out of whack. Okay, well anyways, biological growth hormone. Best way to increase your growth hormone levels, exercise. Exercise will increase secretion of growth hormone. So I'm going to move away from growth hormone. Are there any questions about its effects? It acts through insulin-like growth factors and you break down your energy stores. Okay, well, let's talk about prolactin. Prolactin, PRL short, we already talked about how it's released. Well, we kind of have to talk about the menstrual cycle because it kind of has different effects depending on what part of the cycle you're on or if you're pregnant or not pregnant. So let's first do that dichotomy. Are you pregnant or not pregnant? So let's go with the not pregnant. If you're not pregnant, the female will cycle through a normal 28-day cycle. On average. I'll go over the details of that in the next unit, repro, but simply put, think of it as 14 and 14. There's kind of like the first couple of weeks where estrogen is higher and then second couple of weeks where estrogen is lower. So when you're not pregnant and estrogen's a little bit higher, that's a stimulus for release of PRH. You increase estrogen, you get some PRL, prolactin to target the mammary glands. Not enough for milk production, but maybe you'll notice some swelling and tenderness. Notice the breast region. I like to use the term mammary glands, and to remind us we're mammals, right? We feed our young with milk. So low estrogen, you won't have that. Now, when you're pregnant, the hormone levels increase to the point where you'll have your highest estrogen amounts. So you'll have much higher estrogen. You'll have much more prolactin, PRL. And so you get full-on lactation or milk production. And it's the oxytocin that will let the milk down in the suckling infant. So think about this only for females. In males, not a factor. Okay. Now, what I didn't do was the last two for ACTH and FSH-LH, since I'm going to talk about those glands later on. But make a note of this slide, and maybe at home, since I kind of went through all these kinds of figures, maybe you could do it yourself. Okay, I remember I was making these slides like, that's enough. They can do this on their own. I think they get it by now. So for ACTH and FSLH, see if you can go home and do that yourself. What I've been doing is I talked about the stimuli, the negative feedbacks. I use the terms direct action or tropic, right? Let me make sure I covered that. For example, prolactin is a direct action hormone. Why? It doesn't control the release of another hormone. It targets a tissue and does the physiology. What about PRH? Is that direct action or tropic? It is tropic. It doesn't do the physiology. It controls the release of another hormone. Okay, so that's kind of the thought pattern there. So, on the following slide, let's do this on your half sheet. This kind of harkens back to the start of lecture this morning. Here's A, B, and C. For A, identify 3 parts of the portal system, 1, 2, 3. For B, what hormones does this portal system transport? I mean, there's a bunch of them. There's like 6. If you put just a couple, I just want to make sure you're getting them for the right column. Okay? And then also, one word for C. What type of connection is this? Is it vascular or is it neural? Okay, so take some time. Answer A, B, and C. I'll check in. I want to move on, but since B is the most commonly missed thing on the test, I want to check in on that. I mean, you should have put something like, for B, TRH, CRH, GnRH, or PRH, PIH, all those. It's all the ones. For B, since I still got it up here, all these, they're secreted here. The portal system transports them to here. Okay, that's the most commonly thing missed on the test. I mean, I'll just tell you, I'll like have a, I point to this cell and I say, you know, name some hormones that are secreted. And a lot of students, they'll put these ones, but that's not correct. It's all the ones up here. So let me spend some time thinking about that. Let's move on. Let's answer these together, not on your half sheet. So, I don't grade half sheets too carefully, but today I will look at B. It's the most I'm telling you, no matter how much I emphasize in lecture, come next week, B is a problem. Okay, so really spend some time on that. This one not so hard. Identify A, B, and C. Well, they got A here. I would have put something like infundibulum. For B, it's that long term we wrote out, the hypothalamic hypophyseal tract. It's a tract of axons. It's a tract of axons. And C is just pointing to the posterior lobe or the posterior pituitary. Now, B, we can just kind of do it together. There's only two. One is ADH. What's the other one? Oxytocin is the other one. And it's a direct neural connection. There's no portal system. Okay, you go straight from here, the axons go straight to there. Here they show one capillary bed that will take the ADH and oxytocin to their respective targets. All right, but anyways, it's a different picture. It's the same information. And don't let a different picture confuse you, okay? With your knowledge, you should be able to apply it to any picture that's shown to you. All right, let's take a break. See, come back at 15 minutes. So that's about 8:50. We'll talk about the next gland.